My husband, unaware that I earned $4.20 million a year, looked at me with disgust and said, "You're unstable." I filed for divorce. Be out by tomorrow. The hospital bracelet was still on my wrist when my marriage ended. That detail matters. I want you to hold it because it tells you everything about the kind of man Garrett Walker believed himself to be, the kind who looks at a woman who has just spent 4 hours in a medical facility getting tests she didn't want, still wearing the paper and plastic evidence of it on her arm, and decides that this is the right moment. This is the opening. He was on the couch when I came through the door at 6:40 p.m. Bourbon on the end table, a manila envelope on the coffee table positioned with the particular deliberateness of someone who has been waiting and wants you to notice they've been waiting. The television was on some holiday commercial, a family laughing around a table, the soft orchestral swell of manufactured warmth, and Garrett was watching me with an expression I had seen music before but never correctly identified until that exact moment. It wasn't contempt, it was certainty. Music. He had decided how this was going to go. He glanced at my wrist, at the bracelet, and he smiled. "Hey," he said, "you unstable mess." Music. I stood in the doorway of my own house with my coat still on and my bag on my shoulder, and particular exhaustion of someone who has spent half the day being studied by medical equipment, and I felt something in my chest go very, very quiet. "I filed for divorce," he said, tapping the envelope. "Be out of the house by tomorrow." I looked at the envelope, then at him. "Tomorrow." "Music," I said. "My name's on the deed." He said it the way you state a fact that doesn't require discussion. "You don't contribute anything real. You're dead." "Wait, Sloan. You have been for years." The commercial kept playing behind him. A child laughing, snow falling in soft, impossible clumps. I walked music into the kitchen. I took a glass from the cabinet, filled it from the tap, drank it slowly standing at the sink, and I made sure, very deliberately made sure, that my hands were visible and completely steady. Then I walked back out. "Understood." "Music," I said. He looked at me, and for just a moment, January 4th, 2nd, barely perceptible, something moved behind his eyes. He'd expected something else. Tears, maybe. Music. Volume. Something he could feel superior to. "Don't try anything," he said, pulling his certainty back into place. "My lawyer's already involved." "I imagine he is," I said. I went to the guest room. I did not pack. I did not panic. Music. I did not spend the night staring at the ceiling, rehearsing the things I should have said the way I might have done once years ago when I was still in the habit of needing other people to understand me. Instead, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to Nadia Osei. Nadia Osei, 17 years in family and corporate law, the attorney I had retained on the quiet recommendation of a colleague 2 years earlier. After the third music time, Garrett told me the house was his and I should be grateful to live in it. Nadia answered. On the second ring, I told her what had music happened. She said, "Don't sign anything. Don't leave the premises. Tonight, I'll have a review done by 7 o'clock a.m. The second call was to my financial director at the firm. His name is Desmond Price. Music. He's 54. Meticulous, the person who has managed the structural architecture of my earnings for 6 years. I told him to flag the joint accounts and ensure my compensation transfers. Music for the next cycle were routed to my private account only. Already done, he said, which was technically premature, but I appreciated his instinct. Music. The third call was to First Republic, where we held the joint savings. I requested an immediate access restriction pending legal notification. The representative, professional, unhurried, confirmed it would be processed by morning. Then I lay down on the guest room bed in my work clothes. I didn't sleep immediately, but I wasn't panicking. I was thinking about the envelope on the coffee table and the smirk and the word unstable said to a woman still wearing a hospital bracelet. I was thinking about how thoroughly he had miscalculated. Let me tell you about Sloan Merritt, because Garrett Walker certainly never did. I'm 41, senior executive partner at Aldrich Carver Private Equity. Music, a mid-sized firm with offices in Boston, Chicago, and Dubai. I've been in private equity for 15 years. Started as an analyst at 23. Music. Worked every rung methodically. Made partner at 34, senior partner at 38. Last year, my total compensation was $4.2 million. I chair 2 portfolio company boards. I have a team of 11 people who report to Me and whom I think about genuinely as the kind of investment that compounds. I'm telling you this not to be impressive. I'm telling you this because for 7 years of marriage, my husband thought I worked for a small investment music office and brought home somewhere in the range of $180,000. That is what I had told him. That is what I had maintained carefully and consistently across every conversation about money and career and contribution that our marriage had produced. That decision requires explanation. Music. I met Garrett Walker at a charity gala in 2016. He was 40 at the time, handsome, in a square-jawed, well-maintained way, the owner of a regional commercial real estate consulting firm that did solid, if unspectacular, business. He was charming in the specific way of men who have learned that confidence reads as confidence in most rooms. He made me laugh on 3 separate at the gala, which was more than most people managed. And when he asked for my number, I gave it to him genuinely. What I noticed in the early months and cataloged but did not weigh heavily enough was a particular pattern in how he talked about money and work. Not obvious, not crude, subtle. The way he picked up checks with a particular energy, as if paying confirmed something about the order of things. The way he talked about successful women he knew with a specific quality of admiration that had a ceiling on it. The way when I mentioned a large deal I'd been part of, he would nod and then redirect to something in his own work. Not aggressively, just reflexively, the way a compass always returns to north. I told myself this was just ego, normal, manageable ego, the kind most people have. When we got serious, I made a decision not to hide exactly, but to simplify. I told him I worked in investment management, that I did well, that I handled my own finances independently and preferred to keep it that way. He respected this. He preferred music. I think the version of our dynamic in which he was the primary earner, the provider, the one who had brought stability to an otherwise professional but modest wife. That version suited him in ways that I observed but again did not weigh heavily enough. I paid the down payment on the house, music $340,000, from my own accounts routed through a transfer that Garrett signed off on without asking questions because the paperwork was complex and he trusted, or preferred to trust, that the details didn't require his scrutiny. The deed was in his name because he had arranged the mortgage, and at the time I hadn't thought far enough ahead to insist otherwise, which is the one decision I would make differently. Everything else I paid for, the renovations, the second car, 2 vacations a year, his firm's refinancing in 2020 when his business credit line fell through and he needed a bridge loan and was too proud to tell me exactly how close to the edge things were. Music, so I arranged it quietly through a contact and never raised it again. He thought we were financially comfortable because of him. We were financially comfortable because of me. And for 7 years, I had been content to let him think that music content is the wrong word. I had decided it was easier, that the alternative, the revelation of the full picture, would change things between us in ways I wasn't sure I could predict or manage. What I had not allowed myself to fully acknowledge was that the alternative had been happening anyway, slowly. Music, the way water finds the weakness in a foundation. The comments about my schedule being erratic, my health being unstable, my contributions to our shared music life being vague and unmeasurable. The way he had started referring to the house as his in casual conversation. My house, my renovation, my music space, with the comfortable authority of a man who has decided the record supports his version. The hospital bracelet, that one I'll explain briefly. I have an autoimmune condition, diagnosed music in 2019, managed with medication requiring periodic monitoring. It is not dramatic, is not debilitating, and it has nothing to do with emotional or psychological instability. It is a blood disorder with a Latin name that Garrett had never bothered to remember, and his use of the word unstable tied to the side of my medical bracelet was a deliberate choice. Music, a way of framing, of getting ahead of whatever I might say or do. That was the calculated nature of it. He had been planning this, not impulsively, music carefully. He just hadn't been careful about the right things. At 7:03 a.m., Nadia Oze called. I was already awake, dressed, sitting at the guest room desk with my laptop open, and 3 days worth of portfolio reports to review. Some people stress eat music, I stress work. It's a habit I've never been able to explain to People who don't have it. He has a problem. Nadia said no preamble. She's not a preamble person. His attorney filed the divorce petition, music, citing the deed as sole evidence of ownership. The petition requests full property transfer plus a settlement in his favor. He's claiming you were financially dependent on the marriage. I let that land for a moment. Financially dependent, I repeated. Music, his attorney described you as a part-time consultant with inconsistent income. Nadia said, the word volatile appears twice in the filing. I thought about the $4.2 million, about Desmond Price and the portfolio, boards, and the 11 people who reported to me. He filed fraudulent financial disclosures. Music, I said. He filed what he believes to be accurate disclosures, Nadia said carefully, which is actually more useful for us. He's not lying on paper. He genuinely doesn't know. That means when the actual picture emerges, it's not contested. It's simply corrected very publicly and very completely. What do you need from me? Everything. Compensation records, tax returns for the music last 5 years, documentation of the down payment, transfer. Desmond can provide the compensation verification. He'll have it to you by noon. Good. A pause. Sloan, the house is yours. The down payment is documented and traceable. His name on the deed is a real complication, but not an insurmountable one given the payment history. My expectation is this resolves in your favor. The question is how much he wants to complicate it. Before it does, he'll complicate it. I said, he's already committed to this version of events. Then we let him. I closed my laptop, picked up my bag, and walked out of the guest room. Garrett was in the hallway. He was dressed blazer, the particular business casual of a man about to feel important. And when he saw me, he straightened slightly, the way people do when they've been waiting to be seen. I said, tomorrow, he said. I opened the door halfway. You did, I said, and you'll be hearing from mine. He laughed, the confident laugh, the one that said, I've already won this. With what? Leverage, he said. You have nothing. I thought about Nadia, about Desmond, about the down payment record sitting in a filing system that Garrett had never thought to look at because it had never occurred to him that there was anything worth looking for. I nearly smiled. Music instead. I walked out of the house, got into my car, and drove to the Langham, where I checked into a suite on the 14th floor and ordered room service and spent the next 72 music hours signing paperwork. Nadia moved fast because Nadia always moves fast. By the end of the first day, she had filed a counter petition citing my down payment documentation, $340,000, transferred from my personal account on the date of purchase with full paper trail, and requested an emergency property ownership review through the county court. She had also served formal discovery requests on Garrett's attorney, one Brandon Holt, demanding full financial disclosure from both parties. Brandon Holt, I would learn, was a competent attorney who had been given materially inaccurate information by his client and was about to discover this in the least convenient possible way. Desmond Price sent Nadia the full compensation records by 11:45 a.m. 5 years of W-2s and partnership distributions and performance bonuses, all in the name of Sloan Merritt, all reporting to an address that was unambiguously mine. The total across 5 years was slightly over $18 million. Nadia viewed it and called me. He's going to need a moment, she said. Music, which is as close as Nadia gets to dark humor. On day 2, I had a call with Aldrich Carver's general counsel, Priya Venkataraman, 12 years in corporate legal, a woman, music, whose professional calmness I have always found deeply reassuring, to confirm that my employment records could be made available for legal proceedings if required. Priya confirmed without hesitation. She also flagged very quietly that she was available to provide a supporting declaration if the proceedings required confirmation of my role and compensation. I told her I hoped it wouldn't come to that, she said, with the party killer flatness of a very experienced lawyer. It's going to come to that. She was right. On day 3, music at 2:17 p.m., Garrett called. The confidence was gone. I want to describe the specific quality of its absence because I had heard Garrett Walker's confident voice, music, for 7 years, and I knew every register of it and what came through the phone. On day 3 was something I had never heard from him before, something thin and slightly frantic like a structure. Music that has lost a load-bearing element and is creaking toward its own
Wait.
They froze the accounts, he said. All of them. My checking, the business credit line, the joint.
The
Mortgage payment didn't process. There are people at the house. All of them? I asked. There are people here saying, there's an ownership review. Sloan, what did you do? I leaned back in the hotel chair and looked at the city skyline. Through the floor-to-ceiling window. Boston in November, steel gray, and clear, the river catching the afternoon. Music alight. How did you explain the house purchase to Brandon? I asked. Exactly how it's written on the deed. And the down payment. That was that. Music was from your savings. You transferred it. That wasn't savings. I said, that was compensation. Pause. Compensation for what? Your consulting work. I let the silence run. For a moment. Garrett, music, I said. I'm a senior executive partner at a private equity firm. My compensation last year was $4.2 million. The line went so quiet I could hear him breathing. That's not, he started, stopped. It isn't meant to be funny, I said. Music, why didn't you? I would. You not tell me that? Because I wanted a partner, I said, and I want to be clear that I said this without heat. Music, without performance, just as a plain statement of what had been true, not someone who would decide our relative. Worth the moment he had access to the full picture. I'd watched you decide who mattered based on who earned for long. Enough to know what that information would do. That's not fair. You called me dead weight, I said. You called me unstable while I was wearing a hospital bracelet. You filed a divorce petition describing me as a financially dependent part-time consultant. I paused. Music. I think my read was accurate. We can fix this, he said, and his voice had taken on a new quality, urgent almost, pleading, the sound of a man who has just looked over a ledge he thought was a step. I didn't mean any of it. I was angry. I made a bad decision. You made several, I said, including, I suspect, some creative bookkeeping on the property records. Silence. Music did. You put the house under your business entity at any point? I asked. Longer. Silence. Nadia, sitting across from me at the suite's dining table, leaned forward slightly. There was a restructuring, he said carefully, a tax strategy. It was my accountant's suggestion. Your accountant's suggestion? I repeated. It was routine. Brandon Holt is about to be very surprised by how routine it was, I said. Sloan. Nadia leaned toward the phone. Mr. Walker, this is Nadia Oze. You've been served on the ownership review petition. Please cooperate with a temporary order and have Brandon reach out to my office directly. A silence. Then from Garrett, can you make them leave the people at the house? They'll complete their documentation process and leave on their own schedule, Nadia said. Pleasantly. Please, his voice cracked slightly on the word. Just make this stop. Tell me what you want. You don't get to call me worthless, I said very quietly, and then ask me to make your consequences stop. I ended the call. Nadia looked at me. The business restructuring, she said, that's going to be a problem for him. I know. If he transferred any ownership interest in the property to his LLC without disclosing it to the mortgage holder. No, I said. She looked at me for a moment. Did you know he'd done it? I looked at the skyline. I suspected, I said. He mentioned a tax restructuring. In passing in 2021. I didn't music ask questions. I thought I told myself it wasn't my business. The house was functionally mine regardless of the paperwork. It was always music, functionally yours. Yes, I said, but I'd gotten comfortable letting him believe otherwise, and comfortable is what made this possible. Nadia was quiet for a moment. For what it's worth, she music said, comfortable wasn't the mistake. The mistake was his. The financial inconsistencies emerged over the following 2 weeks with a steady procedural momentum of a process that doesn't require anyone to be emotional about it. Garrett had, in 2021, transferred partial ownership of the property to a single-member music LLC, registered in his name, a common enough tax structure that his accountant had recommended, and that would have been entirely unremarkable except that it had not been disclosed to the mortgage holder, which constituted a technical violation of the loan covenants, and it had been listed in his divorce filing as personal property without disclosure of the business interest, music, which was a different kind of problem entirely. Trevor Solis. 9 years with the County Financial Crimes Division, a man who Nadia described as methodical to a fault and useful to have on your side of a situation, reviewed the documents and flagged 2 items for formal inquiry, the LLC transfer, and a separate matter involving business. Credit line draws that appeared to music have been used for personal property improvements not disclosed on the relevant tax returns. The items were referred. The process began. Music. Brandon Holt called Nadia on a Wednesday and spoke for 45 minutes in the measured, careful tone of a professional who has discovered that his music client provided him with an incomplete picture and is now managing the consequences of that incompleteness. They reached an agreement on a revised settlement framework. The terms were Nadia's, the house, music, with a formal deed correction restoring full ownership to my name, funded by the documented down payment was mine. The joint accounts, restored after the legal freeze, were distributed according to the actual contribution record. Garrett's business music interest claim on several shared assets was reviewed against the business tax records and found to be substantially less clear than he had represented. He did not go to jail. I want to be precise about this. The financial matters were referred and reviewed and resulted in amended filings and civil penalties and a requirement to work with a court-appointed accountant music for 24 months, not a criminal outcome, but an accountable one. The word accountable is doing real work there, and I want to leave it there. On the final day of proceedings, Judge Arlene Whitfield, 23 years on the family court bench, a woman, music, whose face during testimony maintained the particular neutrality of someone who has heard every version of this story, music, and does not find any version surprising anymore, looked at the final record and said, addressing both attorneys, music, that the case represented a level of financial misrepresentation that she found troubling and that the referrals to the relevant authorities had been appropriate. Garrett's attorney nodded. Garrett, sitting at the other table, looked at his hands. I looked out the courtroom window.